Hey y'all, my name is Kayla and welcome to my cozy chaotic corner of the internet. In today's video, I'm going to be covering all the books that I DNF'd in 2024. I wanted to do this for a multitude of reasons. I talked about all the books I read this year. I'm going to be talking about the worst books I read this year. I'm going to be talking about the best books I read this year. But as the self-proclaimed queen of DNFing books, I thought I should kind of, prove it. If you don't know what DNFing is, it means you picked up a book and you did not finish it. I do have 3 categories for this video. I have books that I intentionally hard DNF'd. These are books that I have no intention of ever picking up again, ever. I have books that I intentionally DNF, but it was more a soft DNF. These could be books that maybe just at the time I wasn't in the right mood or headspace to read them. And then the final category, which is more elusive, is the unintentional DNF. These are going to be books that I picked up, I started to read, and kind of like with a soft DNF, another book caught my eye and I just started reading something else. And there was no intent behind DNFing these books, that just so happened that that's eventually what ended up happening. With all of that noted, let's hop into things. We have a few books we're going to be talking about today. To start, I'm going to cover all the books I unintentionally DNF'd. And to be honest with you guys, this list might actually be longer than what I'm actually presenting to you. Because again, these were books that I picked up, I started reading, I got at least a few chapters in, and something else just caught my eye. Or I put it back on the bookshelf and completely forgot that I started it until I was skiiming my bookshelf being like, I started that book. Why didn't I finish it? Unintentional DNFs. We're going to actually start with the book that I was reading on my Kindle, and that is Quarry Girls. This book is one that I was doing a tandem read where I was listening to the audiobook because I believe the Kindle ebook also came with the Audible audiobook. This book just fell into the abyss of my electronic devices, and because I didn't have a physical copy, it was just I kind of forgot about it. Next, we have something that might be a shocker to y'all. That is Lady Macbeth. I got 2, maybe 3 chapters into Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. I think I started Lady Macbeth at the end of a month, and then a project popped up where I started working on that project and completely forgot that I started Lady Macbeth. Next, we have a library checkout. This was actually back when I was doing Christmas in July, and I was reading a mystery called Slashing Through the Snow, and I think I got about halfway through the book and then I just had to return it. So again, unintentional DNF for Slashing Through the Snow. Next, we have The Haunting by Natasha Preston, and like all these books, it's a book I own and I started it and then something else just caught my eye. Okay, a part of me feels like this should be on the intentional soft DNF because I do vividly recall being I think I'm gonna set this book down. The book is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, and this is a hefty book. And the thing is there would be moments that would pique my interest. Some point around the 30% marker, I just set the book down and started something else. Could be an unintentional DNF, but I do remember maybe around the 15% marker, I was I don't know about this book. Next, actually, this is a book I have started multiple times and it's never been an intentional DNF. It's just been something else has caught my eye. And this is a nonfiction book called Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell. I think for me, especially, it is so easy to kind of set down a nonfiction book. This book in particular has such a voice and personality that I love. So I do plan on reading this book. It's just I start reading it and then something else just catches my eye and I want to read something else, And then the last book on the unintentional DNFs is Tithe, A Modern Fairy Tale by Holly Black. This is a reread for me, and I got about 50% of the way through. I was powering through it, just devouring everything. And then again, I think I started working on a project, so it kind of just was put on the shelf and I forgot about it. So I will be going back to Tithe in 2025. Let's talk about intentional DNFs that are soft DNFs as of right now. We have Ordinary Human Feelings. This was a audiobook check out through Libby, and I was enjoying it. It is literary fiction, but it is about a crime. There were just other audiobooks popping up on my Libby app that I was like, ooh, I'd rather kind of listen to these than this one. And y'all, the hilarity is I maybe had like an hour or two left. Soft DNF, I might return to it. It is interesting, but it's like, because it's literary fiction and it's dealing with like murder and crime, with this book in particular, we were getting like a lot of character side quests where we were being introduced to all these characters that at the moment didn't feel like they had any relation to the actual crime that was occurring. So, I mean, maybe eventually they'll all intertwine, but I have had an experience with literary fiction in particular where you're kind of introduced to characters or storylines that don't necessarily ever interweave themselves back to the main plot point. So that's one thing I don't necessarily love about literary fiction, and I'm kind of like concerned is what's going to happen with ordinary human failings. So we will see if I ever return to it. This honestly should be under my hard DNF category, but I have it here because I've been told so many times by so many people that I will love the second and third book of the series. But y'all, I cannot make it past the 30% mark in A Court of Thorns and Roses. I can't. I've started this book 3 times now. Each time I get a little bit further, but I'm like, am I gonna have to start this book like 10 times before I hit 100%? What the heck? And when I say start, I mean I'm starting from 0% and like working my way up. I own it. I feel like I should at least read it because I own it, but I don't know, y'all. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. And then another intentional DNF, but it's a soft DNF, but also could fall in the realm of eventually becoming I have no interest in reading this ever again, is The Resort by Sarah Oakes. The book just kind of started completely different than how I thought it would. We're really getting to know all the different players of the story, which I mean, I guess makes sense. I feel like we're kind of getting backstory that's not necessarily needed, and I was just kind of getting bored. So I did intentionally set it down. Will I return to it? Possibly. Like the premise of the book still sounds interesting to me, but also I own a lot of other books and there's a lot more books coming out. Maybe I'd just rather read something other than this, but we'll see. Okay, y'all, now we are heading into the intentional DNFs that I have zero, and I mean zero, interest in ever returning to. We have The Girl in Red by Christina Henry. This is supposed to be a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. There was I believe a disease that was happening where I DNF'd the book. I don't think we ever got like the full story about what is actually happening to people, but y'all, I was just so bored. I was so bored. I just like, this is a book I have zero interest. In fact, I think I already got rid of it. Pretty sure I dropped it off at a free little library already. The Girl in Red by Christina Henry. I wasn't a fan of it, personally. Next, we have Love in the Time of Serial Killers by Alicia Thompson. In theory, sounds amazing, where you have a woman who just moved to a new neighborhood doing her doctoral thesis on serial killers. She meets this guy in her neighborhood where she's like, he could be a serial killer. I don't know. So I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be amazing. I'm gonna love it so much. I could not stand our main female character. She was so annoying. She was so rude. A lot of her rudeness, though, I will say was her internal monologue, but we as the audience are stuck in that internal monologue. So I'm just like, I do not like this woman in any capacity. So I DNF'd it, and I have zero interest in ever returning to this book. Next, we have Starling House. And if you guys can give me a valid reason this can turn into a soft DNF. I was listening to the audiobook, and maybe that's where my failing is. I should not be listening to the audiobook, because the audiobook literally inserts the footnotes exactly where the footnotes would be. And for some reason, this book has so many footnotes. And no offense, but the footnotes I didn't find added anything to the story. I'm also the type of reader where I only reference footnotes if I feel like I need to know the element behind the footnote. Like if you're reading something and you see that there's a footnote for something, if I'm not really comprehending what this thing is, then I'll read the footnote, but I'll usually read it once I finish like a certain section. I'm not going to just mid-sentence divert my eyes to the footnote. And that's what the audiobook was doing. Like as soon as a footnote was noted, it would jump to the footnote. And a footnote, there were some footnotes that were like half a page long. Why? Why? I got maybe like 20% into the book and just, I couldn't. Next, we have Ninth House. And in theory, Ninth House is a book totally up my alley. I read the inside cover of it and I was like, oh my God, this sounds amazing. But I hated it. I was so bored with it. I started it twice. I started Ninth House twice and I just could not get into it. I was like, this is so boring. I am not interested in any of this. Thank you, next. The next book is Just Like Magic. This is supposed to be a little cute holiday rom-com, but similar to Love in the Time of Serial Killers, this had a main female character who's just so vapid, so full of herself. I'm sure she has a delightful character arc where she eventually becomes a tolerable human being. But because we are from her point of view, were we from her point of view or was it very heavy on her? I was just like, I don't care. I do not care. She's so annoying. I think I got maybe 2 chapters in, and A Ghost of Christmas is, I believe, her love interest, or he's like a component in the book, and I pretty much DNF'd it after we met him because I was like, I don't care. We're dealing with a ghost and this main character is obnoxious. Y'all, I'm not gonna lie, this was like the easiest book for me to DNF, but I felt bad DNFing this book, and that is The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And if you don't know, The Final Gambit is the 3rd book in the Inheritance Game series. I read the Inheritance Games, absolutely loved it. Book 1, amazing. Book 2, I was like, this could be better, but I'm not like mad at it. Then I start Final Gambit and we're introduced to this new character we heard about at the end of the 2nd book. I don't care about any of this at all. This whole series is young adult, but The Final Gambit felt like a teenage book, like a book written for teenagers. I was like, this would have been something like teenage Kayla would be interested in, but adult Kayla, I'm like, this is dumb. I hate this. Next, we have The Adversary by Michael Crummy. This was a book that I started reading for Can You Judge a Book by Its Cover? So I had no context behind what this book was about. I just picked it because the cover was gorgeous. I love the cover. It was beautiful. But this was a historical fiction about 2 feuding siblings who kind of like pull the town they live in into their drama. You think George R.R. Martin kills up characters left, right, and center. No. Michael Crummy in The Adversary kills up characters. So you get to like know a character, like a character, appreciate who these characters are, and then they're just killed off and we're on to the next people. And I am very much like a character-driven person. I did not give a singular fluff about our 2 feuding siblings. I really liked certain characters and then they would just get killed off 2-3 chapters later, and I was like, okay, well, I can't keep having new characters introduced to me just for them to get killed off, so I'm done reading. I was just done. Death Comes to Pemberley. I hated this book. And the funny thing is, y'all, I only read the prologue. I read the prologue and maybe a chapter or 2. But I know for sure I read the prologue, and after the prologue, I hated this book. I hated it. So Death Comes to Pemberley is taking the characters from Pride and Prejudice and it's kind of like telling their story after the fact. The author decided to write Elizabeth Bennet, who's our main character in Pride and Prejudice, as this woman who was just in all of it for the money. They really made Elizabeth Bennet seem how Darcy was perceiving the Bennet family to be. People who just were trying to get with him and his friends for their money. And so at the beginning of this book, it's pretty much alluding to the fact that that was Elizabeth's plan all along. Like, she didn't have any interest in Darcy. She just wanted his money. And I'm just like, oh my God, I hate this so much. So I couldn't even read the book. The Elegance of the Hedgehog is a dual POV book. I really like the little girl in the dual POV, but then there's like an older woman. And I could not stand the curmudgeon older woman. The like 8-year-old sassy girl, I was like, oh my God, I love her side. But then we would always hop to the curmudgeon older woman. I was just like, I don't care. I don't care. And There He Kept Her by Joshua Mulling. Honestly, no, this should have been in the soft DNF pile because I do think eventually I will return to this book. My biggest complaint with this book is, again, it's multi-POV, and I feel like that can be really hit or miss because I start to grow fond of like a specific character, and then we're introduced to someone else's perspective, and I may or may not like that person's perspective, and that's what happened in this book. So we have our detective, Ben Packard, who I love so much, really enjoy his perspective. And then we were brought to the perspective of our bad guy. And no offense, but I hated it because the way the story was being told, it was like almost like we were supposed to be feel sorry or bad for the bad guy, even though he's like killing people. And I just didn't like that. I felt icky. But I do kind of want to like hop back into this, see if maybe I can push past those elements. Next, Cave of Bones is a detective series by Anne Hillerman. Yeah, I started reading this book, and I don't know if it's because this wasn't the first book, so I was kind of like just thrown into the mix, but it was reading more like a textbook because it would just like inundate you with all this information about the Four Corners region of America, about the Navajo tribe, and all that stuff. And if you watched my book about the Hatak witches by Devin Mehesua, I think that Devin told that story really well because while, yes, they were integrating elements of Choctaw, I think it was the Choctaws, in the Hatak witches, I really like that even though we were getting information about the tribe and like the historical parts of it, it was woven into the storyline so well that it was just effortless. You didn't seem like you were just getting inundated with information. You were like, oh, this is like an applicable part of this story. Whereas with Cave of Bones, it felt like you were just getting like a wall of a textbook, and then you would kind of get spurts of the storyline. And I'm just like, nope, can't do it. No, thank you. Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. This was another audiobook where I think I literally had like maybe 40 minutes left of it. I just wasn't interested. I got to a certain point where I was like, I don't care. I don't care. And then the final one is Day 4. If you're going to give me multiple point of views in a book, like you really have to do it well. Day 4 was multiple point of views of these people that are on a cruise, and the ship itself starts to shut down. Like there's a problem with the ship, and we're literally kind of thrown into the problem. Like the problem is happening, so everyone is going to their muster stations. That element was really fascinating, but then we would get like all these different perspectives about the same event occurring, and I just couldn't stand it. And then we got to a certain character who was maybe the bad guy, I'm not sure, but he was definitely really grimy, and I'm like, I just don't care about reading from the grimy people's point of views. That's just not my personal preference when it comes to reading books. Anyways, y'all, that was a long video, a lot longer than I thought it would be. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments down below if you DNF books. Did this inspire you to DNF more books? Again, y'all, I can DNF books at the drop of a hat. If something's just not holding my attention, I'm not gonna keep pushing through. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I will catch you very soon in an upcoming video.